Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us today at the Anti-Bullying Advisory Committee meeting. As Anna mentioned, my name is Shuo Chen, and I'm a commissioner with the MHSOAC and chair for this committee. We are really pleased to continue this conversation on the Anti-Bullying Advisory Committee at the Commission, and really glad that we're continuing this conversation now since our last meeting a couple months ago. As you know, according to AB 1134, the California State Legislature has allocated $5 million to support the development of a peer social media network for children and youth with an emphasis on students in kindergarten and grades 1 to 12 who have experienced bullying or are at risk of bullying based on race, ethnicity, language, country of origin, or perceived race, ethnicity, or country of origin. And so today, I'm really excited that we'll hear a presentation from Media Cause, the agency who is developing the anti-bullying social media peer support network and our social media strategy here. So for today's meeting, before we launch into that, we'll first of all start with roll from the committee members. Following that, we'll open up for general public comments. So I'd love to pass it on to Cody to take over for roll call.
Good afternoon. I'm going to take roll now. Please just let me know if you are present. Commissioner Chen?
Present.
Stacy Alamo?
Present.
David Ball?
Present.
Emily Chan? Matthew Deep? Jinky Dollar? Jessica Duong? Ashia Hewage?
Present.
Am I saying your last name correctly?
It's Asha, but yeah, really close.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Candy Lee? Miko Mastrili? Mimi Meyer Rosales? Sasha Nera? Nathan Yo? Carrie Pasanti?
Here. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Sydney Pon? Jasmine Brooke Puente? Maya Smith? Sophie Sue? Michael Trimble? Laura Walker? And Michelle Wright?
Present.
Great, thank you. So we have 6 members present unless anyone else has shown up.
Hello, was my name called?
Yes, but looks like you were here, so I will mark you as present. Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies, my internet cut out.
No worries. Did I miss anyone else? Great, thank you.
Perfect. And with that, would love to move to general public comment as well. Cody, would you like me to go through the general housekeeping items, or would you prefer to take over?
The procedures and stuff, I'm happy to do that.
Please, thank you.
Okay. This is just some boilerplate language, so bear with us if you've heard it before. Some of you may not be familiar with the procedures for making public comments, so I want to explain the process. If you would like to comment on an agenda item, please wait until that agenda item starts. You may request to make public comment by clicking the raise hand icon on your computer or the app, or if calling in by phone, press *9. You will be placed in the queue to comment on that agenda item. When it is your turn to comment, the moderator will unmute your line and announce your name or the last 3 digits of your telephone number. When you are unmuted, we will be able to hear you. We'll do our best to take the comments in the order they are received. Once the public comment period for the agenda item starts, generally we will close the public comment queue. The moderator will insert the word last comment next to the commenter's name or number to identify the last public comment. So please make requests to comment as early as possible. Members of the public should be prepared to complete their comments within 3 minutes or less, depending on time constraints. When we've reached the end of your time, our staff will let you know, but we will let you finish your thoughts. We don't want to cut you off, but we need to maintain time limits. We appreciate your understanding with the process. We have committee members and people listening on the phone, so please make sure to speak into the microphones at all times for those of you in the room. And this isn't written in the notes here, but I think we do have one member of the public in person. So I think that person will, or anyone who's joined in person in the room, just raise your hand so we know that you have a public comment. And back to you, Commissioner Chen.
Perfect. Thank you, Cody. I know Stacy has had her hand up for a while, so Stacy, over to you.
I had it up because I just wanted to let you know that the link is not working when you go to the website. I did have the people email me that were trying to get on, and when I tried to get on first, it didn't work, so I had to go into the agenda. So I hope that doesn't cut into my 2 minutes, but I just, if somebody could check that, because it was difficult to get on. But I do have a general public comment when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you for that, Stacy. And I might need you and the team to help take a quick look at that. I know there was an updated link that was sent out earlier today, and maybe that's why people were having difficulty, but yeah, I would love to have the team's help there. But Stacy, back to your general comment. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Chen. I want to thank Chair Chen, the committee members, and all the staff on both the OAC and the contract staff for all the work they have done so far for this project. I was very excited about the presentation today and look forward to it. Oh, and I'm Stacy Hiramoto, the director of REMCO, the Racial and Ethnic Mental Health Disparities Project. I do wish to pose some questions that I'm hoping will be answered during the presentation. And I ask them now because if I wait until the end, there is not always time or opportunity for them to be addressed. The first question that I have has to do with the overall project itself. This project was sponsored by the Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus as part of their API equity budget allocations for fiscal year 21-22. It is my understanding that one of the reasons for this particular project was that the API community, in this case, API youth, had experienced a heartbreaking and real increase in bullying due to and related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, youth from all communities experienced numerous hardships due to the pandemic, but what people from the API communities experienced was based on their being from the Asian and Pacific Islander community. This project was to address this situation. I'm aware that the report states that the goals of this initiative are to bring a collective awareness to the discrimination, violence, and abuse many young people face due to race, culture, language, or country of origin or perceived country of origin. While I'm not in any way suggesting that any youth from any community should be excluded from the program, I am wondering why there isn't more specific language in either report emphasizing targeting and appropriately serving youth from the Asian Pacific Islander community. I did speak with the staff from the API Legislative Caucus and asked them if this was not the intent of the funding. They seemed to be surprised at my questions. The project should emphasize and be geared toward the needs of youth from the API community because of what they were experiencing during the pandemic. Of course, the project should be open to everyone, but certainly it should be designed to outreach and serve API youth and their particular needs. I have heard that some believe that a state RFP or state contract cannot be written to target or serve a particular racial or ethnic community. This is simply not true. Most of you have heard of the California Reducing Disparities Project, which serves 5 specific communities and has over 40 contracts with community-based organizations specializing in serving particular racial, ethnic, or LGBTQ communities. There are many other examples I could give. In addition, it is REMCO's belief that the contractors should reflect this underlying commitment by having significant numbers, if not the majority of their board members and their staff from the API community, as well as any subcontractors that are used. I raise these questions open to the possibility that there really are no problems or issues here, just communication. I hope that during the presentation, some of these questions or issues that I've raised will be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Stacy. I know you and I have directly talked about this as well, so it's really helpful that you're bringing up this particular conversation now. I'm sure Anna and the team can give you a much more nuanced answer than I can as well. But my latest understanding is that being able to have funding directed towards specific populations, like the example that you raised, Stacy, is slightly different when it comes to race, ethnicity, and perceived country of origin. But I will leave that to Anna and the team to come back to you on. I don't see any other hands raised for public comment. So Anna, is that something you would like to address now, or should we circle back to this at the end? Oh, and I apologize. I see Myron's hand up.
And we also have at least one person in the room that would like to make comment.
Sounds good. So maybe we'll go to Myron first. Myron, please, you have the floor.
Hey, good afternoon, commission members and general public. My name is Myron Kwan. I run a nonprofit community mental health agency called Pacific Asian Counseling Services. We are based in Los Angeles County, and we serve APIs throughout the county. I am actually just echoing the same concerns that were raised by Stacy concerning funding. We are fortunate to be recipients of Stop the Hate funding, which also had, I think, had similar issues in that it was unclear who was the intended target audience of the funding, despite the money originating through the API-led caucus and various Stop the Hate founders. The only thing that I can add on to what Stacy has already raised is that I'm also very fortunate to have worked with the California Department of Public Health and worked with the Tobacco Control Prevention Project here in LA County. And we've never been afraid to go ahead and earmark money for Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, for Pacific Islanders, African American, LGBTQ. We recognize who are the underserved populations in California, in LA County, and we recognize that there are times that we need to go ahead and ensure that any work that we do is appropriate. I also do hear on the other side, so I'm not playing devil's advocate, but I do hear on the other side, having worked with public health, some confusion by some folks who are conservative, who worry about Prop 209, what have you. And again, I recognize and acknowledge those fears and concerns, but I don't even begin to see how they're relevant to today's conversation. If you're going to be working on anything that's health related or anything that is unique to various communities, where it's anti-Semitism or anti-queer hate incidents, and this is what we want to work on, you name it, you fix it, and you move forward to collectively. Don't try and hide the ball and let conservative people tell you that that CRT is bad for kids. So I kind of went off on a tangent, but it really is relevant for everyone on today's call. And I wish all the commissioners the best of luck to speak more about this and try to get the right answer.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Myron. So you're absolutely right, both of you, Stacy and Myron, that the funding obviously was initially coming out of this particular conversation around Stop API Hate. And that's partly also why I'm appointed the chair of this particular committee. But I would really defer to Anna around kind of the specific details. Maybe Anna, would you like to address that now?
You know, I think that we've had a lot of conversations with Media Cause about this, and I think that I would love for Media Cause to give their presentation. I think that you'll see a lot in the presentation and our research that we've done so far. And if after that, we still want to focus in on our target population even more, I think that's the time for more discussion and comment on, and that's what we're here for today, is to hear back from the community about whether or not we're on track, on target, that sort of thing. So if that's okay. Do we have the public comment in the room? Did you want to comment now? Okay, you can come.
Good afternoon, commissioners and everyone else virtually. High five. We're here to talk about bullying and a campaign to be a little bit more structured and a little bit more healthy going forward. And I appreciate all the work that we've done to this point, and to go forward, as we spoke in the last meeting with that Song for Charlie program, is a tool that we can collaboratively work together to bring into the social media campaign. What I'd like to do is, again, my name is Kevin Dredge. I'm a public advocate into mental health and well-being. And what we have going on with Access Sacramento, it's a television and radio station that's right down the street on 47th and T. We've got a group of dynamic people that have been doing this for 30 years that are just really, really excited to make a difference. And one thing that we're doing right now with fentanyl is that there needs to be immediate action. And with this Song for Charlie organization, they've got a built-in platform that will satisfy the needs of every community, every school, every business that we have. So if I could please ask that we can incorporate with the social media platform to bring in Access Sacramento, to where we can bring this on the radio, we can bring this on the local TV channels, and just streamline some prevention into bullying. One other thing, when we talk about bullying, it's been established through the Sandy Hook organization, is that the majority of the people that are taking lives and doing these mass shootings have been completely 100% bullied throughout their life. And when we look at bullying, that's one of the unfortunate situations that we have when we lose our mental health and we go a little bit insane. So yeah, that's it. And I appreciate what we're doing here. And if I can please request a meeting with either Toby or you or whoever else, to where we can access Sacramento into collaborating with the social media campaign.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And hopefully you'll be able to stay for the remainder of the meeting as well. And you'll get to listen to the rest of the work that Media Cause has done, and that we do have time after the presentation to kind of discuss next steps and follow-ups as well. So would certainly love to plug you into that piece.
So, and one unfortunate part is that we have a live presentation going on at the studio right now, and it starts at 5. I am on camera 3, so I am obligated to be at the station to shoot this live program. So if I can maybe get a hold of you, hopefully within the next few days, to where we can collaborate a little bit more, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. And you have Anna in front of you, it looks like. I'm trying to tell from the camera angles. So we'll definitely be in touch there. And good luck with your live stream.
Wonderful. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care. So with that, Anna, if there are no other public comments that you see on your side, I don't see any other hands up. Perfect. Now, without further ado, finally on to what everyone has been waiting for, our presentation by Media Cause. So Media Cause is, of course, the general contractor who is developing the anti-bullying social media peer support network and also our social media strategy. And Media Cause would like to present their latest market research and discuss their findings with you all. After they present, we would love to hear feedback from the committee and the public about what they've learned so far and thoughts that you might have. And of course, without further ado, I'd love to introduce Teresa Loy, Melvin Carcenti, Clara Campbell, and Stephanie Kong from Media Cause. Thank you all for being here today, and over to all of you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chen, and good afternoon, everyone. Anna, can I share my screen?
You Should be able to. I made you co-host.
Okay. All right. I am going to go and everyone should be able to see my screen once it's done loading. And we'll get started. So again, good afternoon, everyone. We're very excited to be here today and share what we've worked on so far. Before we dive into the presentation, we wanted to kind of give you kind of the agenda for our presentation. So the purpose of this call will be for us to share our findings and the work that we've done so far on this anti-bullying initiative and gain insight and alignment going forward. In terms of our process. So we'll outline our findings and I'll share with you the outline that we have for this afternoon, and we'll facilitate discussion around 3 key sections: stakeholder insight that we conducted, youth audience survey, and then a wide cultural landscape. And we will have 2 opportunities for discussion throughout this presentation. And lastly, the outcome is really gaining feedback, having discussion with all of you as we move forward into the strategy development phase of this campaign. So we will go through a few things today. So first, I'll do a quick recap of where we are with the project and our process, and then I'll pass it on to Teresa to go through stakeholder insights and then the youth audience surveys and takeaways from that. And then we'll pause there to have a discussion on these 2 sections. And then I will go through the cultural landscape, and we'll have the second opportunity to discuss that part. So first, let's go quickly through kind of our project and process overview. So as you all know, bullying is an issue that affects not only young people, but their families, educators, and their entire community. And our campaign and the resources that will be created will seek to create connection and safe space for these entire communities so that everyone can come together to find solution and create positive change in healthy environments. We have worked with the team at the Commission on what we call a focus statement that's on the right, and I will read this. This statement is for us to kind of stay focused on what we're trying to accomplish and kind of use that as a North Star throughout our work. So this is our focus statement. Our work together will focus on reaching, connecting, and serving young people of diverse background and beyond who have experienced hate or bullying. Guided by the voices of young people, community leaders, and experts, will aim to create a safe and meaningful space for youth and allies to act in solidarity to create and promote well-being for themselves and their peers. So in order to do that, we've started doing a few things. So where we are today is we've conducted the initial phase of what we call our discovery process, which is the research process. So we've spoken to a few members of the community that are present today. We've conducted a survey with 200+ youth across California. And then we did more research and analysis around the landscape and the dynamics of bullying for young people today. So this is what we'll cover today. And then what is next for us? So something that is already ongoing is audience research. So via focus groups, one-on-one interviews with young people, with parents, with educators. And then we also have ongoing meetings with the Youth Advisory Committee, which I see a few of those members present today as well. And so all of that, we'll take all of those findings, all of those insights to then go into the strategy phase of the campaign, where I'm sure we'll be able to discuss, with some of you in terms of partnerships to be able to, to work all together for that campaign. And from there, we'll have, build the platform, and then we'll launch the platform hopefully in Q1 of 2023. Without further ado, I am going to pass it on to Teresa for the Stakeholder Insights.
Great, thank you, Melvin. And just to build on what Melvin had said, we already started some of those focus groups. We just completed talking to 3 focus groups of parents, which was super insightful. But as part of our process, yeah, a lot of research, a lot of talking to folks firsthand to make sure that our strategy and campaign is driven by, their needs that are relevant and insightful and authentic to young people. So I'm going to start by sharing stakeholder insights. And this is really a high-level recap. We spoke with many experts in the bullying and prevention space, researchers as well, many of whom are in the room today or on the phone call. We talked about a diverse range of things, including potential risk factors, prevention efforts that are underway within counties and school districts. We talked about support efforts. We talked about just the broader dynamic of what's happening with young people in schools today with technology and with just a divisive government. In order to, get through this fairly quickly, we decided to share just a small portion of our learnings that was focused on what this project needed to achieve from the perspective of our stakeholders. And so I will start there with must-haves. So as we build out our campaign and our digital platform, a few things our stakeholders offered as must-haves are that it's youth-created and youth-led. I'm looking on the left side, age-specific and age-appropriate, anonymous and safe, and immediate and easy. And I'll go through each one. For youth-specific or youth-created and youth-led, that's really putting young people at the center. So whether that's, and these are just ideas in the bullet points, but whether that's facilitating peer-to-peer discussions, using videos, quotes, and testimonials of people their age, partnering with influencers, we know that will be part of the strategy that young people look up to. Content creation, so having young people create their own content rather just digesting material. Maybe an educational hub where they create accounts, save content. Maybe there's some gamification, like receiving badges or progress, things like that to keep young people engaged, and empowering young people to speak up and take action. So we heard that programs that have been most successful in schools are those that train young people to use their own voice in an effective way. So thinking about how our platform will empower young people, and additionally considering direct messaging to bystanders who are silent today, but who can be part of the process to change social norms. We also heard grassroots mobilization of local communities could be important. So thinking about localization and how that might be a part of this platform are things that we're keeping in mind as we build it out. On the next slide, we heard specifically, we're talking about a broad age group, K through 12. So we have to think about our audiences a little bit differently. For the younger kids, kindergarten through 13, we need to think about, the role of technology and social media and filtering perhaps some of these resources through parents and educators, and therefore having them play an integral part of this process in our learning. Some ideas that came up is school districts providing flyers, just helping build awareness of what we're building. Educator trainings and workshops. Once this campaign is done, are there toolkits? Are there things that we can provide? And all while keeping in mind stigmas and cultural barriers within families, whether that's a language barrier or simply just not fully understanding some of the things that young people today are going through in different families. The other thing is it needs to be anonymous and safe. 100% needs to be, something that young people feel safe using, that they won't feel exposed on, that it's not a platform for further bullying. We heard the Reddit model is successful and that a lot of people are using it as a peer-to-peer way to interact, but that moderators need to be a big part of this safe space. And that it needs to be immediate and easy. So to keep in mind that counseling sessions need to be scheduled quickly. Keep in mind that we can't create things that make young people have to go somewhere via a car or have to pay money for things because those are limited resources for them. And then on the next slide. Would you be able to click to the next slide? Oh, here we go. The tone and voice of our campaign needs to be direct, authentic, and youth-driven. And that means a few things. It means to be direct and real. So we heard that there's a lot of tendency in older campaigns that address bullying to make it feel a little bit like an after-school special, to shy away from talking about the hard things, and that young people today really want to hear and be a part of that conversation when we're talking about hard things. The second thing is to not necessarily label everything as bullying as a broad umbrella bucket. If we're talking about hate or racism against the AAPI community, let's call it that and not just kind of blur it under this racism bucket, but that, let's name it. If it's hate, abuse, shaming, let's name it and just be real. And that leads to not shying away from the heavy stuff, in that young people are shielded from a lot of these things. So if there's opportunity in what we're building to connect to, topics that sort of are related to bullying, like suicide, addiction, poverty, let's enable these conversations. Let's create a platform that lets young people really use their voice to talk about what they want to talk about. And on the next slide, that language matters. So being considerate of first person language, person who was bullied rather than victim, and avoid language that can be construed as victim blaming. So what could you have done differently? And finally, just that representation is important. So including people that that maybe are underrepresented today, different races, gender identities, people of different sizes, and of different backgrounds. So all of those we heard as being really critical to the success of what we're building. And then I'll go on to the youth audience survey, and then we'll pause for discussion. So we fielded a survey in June through July of the summer through SurveyMonkey, and we recruited 18-year-old California residents, so all across the state. To qualify, participants had to indicate that they've experienced bullying or racism from friends, peers, or acquaintances between 3rd and 12th grade. The reason for 3rd and not through kindergarten is because they had to be 18 to answer this survey. And we thought any younger than 3rd grade may not be able to think back and provide accurate enough responses. So we'll really rely on our conversations with parents to get a deeper understanding of that younger age group. We talked about the events surrounding bullying, platform or media preferences that young people have today. And then we shared a couple of questions on initial ideas that we had for what this could be, and got some initial insights on what was appealing or relevant for young people. Our demographics, so we recruited for a mix of races and ethnicities with a target of 1/3 being AAPI respondents. So we did hit that right around 32 and some change for AAPI, but we really also wanted a representative sample of demographics that reflected the rest of California. And so we had a total of 217 respondents. And then I'll take you through a summary of findings. We do have more in-depth slides with, sort of the chart, if you will, that we can talk through in more detail if there's questions. But we learned bullying occurred most frequently in middle school. So a little more than 1/3 of incidents. High school and elementary school were fairly evenly split. For AAPI respondents, it tends to occur a little bit younger, with an increase to 41% in 6th to 8th grade, and roughly 9% for younger than 2nd grade, which is the highest percentage for that age group. 82% experienced name calling or being made fun of. So that was the #1 form of bullying that we heard, while close to 60% experienced racially offensive language or hate speech. That number in itself is already very high, we found. But for AAPI respondents, that jumps to 72% for experiencing racially offensive language or hate speech. Bullying still happens mostly at school. So 83% of our respondents indicated that school was where they were where it took place primarily. So that could have, the way the question was worded, could have led to, choosing one place, which is primarily school. We found only 5% indicated that it happened online. We know online and other resources and tell us that cyberbullying is much more pervasive. It could be a couple of things. It could be that they had to answer primarily where it took place. And second, that given that they were 18, if they were answering for something happening in 3rd or 5th grade, cyberbullying may have been less prevalent then. So those were just some caveats there. Only half of participants told anyone about the incident. So the half that did tell somebody, it was generally a parent, teacher, a counselor, or friend. For AAPI respondents, it was similar, 5% less, slightly fewer, 46% told anyone, parent, friend, and teacher all being fairly equal. But that leaves the other half of people who are not telling anyone. And the reasons for this, and we have a slide on just verbatims or open-ended responses, if you will, that speaks to why. But in summary, fear, embarrassment, and feeling like it wouldn't have made a difference. So stigma is a big part of it. And we'll talk about that in more detail in upcoming slides. On the next slide, 73% of respondents did not seek out information or help online or anywhere else. About 12% did look online for information, and roughly 9% looked online for peers to speak with. So we have a little more detail in the next couple slides on why as well, but I'll just tell you the number one top reasons why is not knowing where to look, not knowing what to look for, not having access to internet at the time, and again, not feeling like it'll make a difference. When we asked teens what they would have really liked at the time, a lot of open-ended responses just said for someone to listen and support them. Of the initial ideas we shared, a safe online peer community was preferred as the most useful resource in a number of ideas that we shared. When talking about bullying or racism, Instagram is the social media platform of choice, 65%, followed by 49% using TikTok, and then 30% using Snapchat. And this is specifically on talking about these types of topics. When we asked what they're just using to communicate with friends, it was Instagram, then text messaging as second. And we have that data in more detail as well. 60% of our respondents that we talked to already indicate they talk about racism or bullying to some degree on social media. And then when, asked, participants are most likely to engage in content from someone they know. So personal connection or familiarity drives interest the most, more than simply someone their age or even an influencer. And then content from companies or brands that they like or professionals or experts in the field were the least likely to get attention from them. So these are all findings that play into some of our takeaways. On the next slide, I mentioned some open-ended responses. So just sharing here that fear and embarrassment, really playing into the stigma, feeling like it might get worse if they shared with somebody or that they'll get made fun of, wouldn't have made a difference. We did read a lot of responses that they told somebody and it didn't change anything. They told the teacher, nothing happened, or that it was brushed off or feeling like people wouldn't believe them. And then not wanting to make a big deal of it, not wanting it to become something that causes worry for their family or friends. On the next slide, just a little bit more detail on why they didn't share, why they didn't look outside for more resources. If you can click, Melvin. So not knowing what to look for, not having access to that information, whether that's technology or internet. Not thinking it would help again. So nothing really helped. School counselors were the only resource. Information online today, maybe not helpful for them. And then some thought it was their fault. A few mentioned not knowing that it was bullying, thinking that that was just their friends or, not really knowing what to name it or thinking that it could pass. And then on the next slide, this was sort of a continuation of the question of what resources or support would they have liked to have? And emotional support, I think, was something that came up a lot. So having a trusted adult, somebody to listen to them, someone to acknowledge how they felt, or other students knowing other people dealt with a similar type of situations. And I think I personally thought it was surprising that we didn't hear more of wishing that the conflict was mediated, wishing that a teacher stepped in and changed things. It was a lot of emotional support and feeling heard and feeling like it was somebody was on their side. Again, this is why we're going to do focus groups and interviews as well, because this was a survey, so we're relying on open-ended written responses, but we wanted to share this initially, which leads to our takeaways on the next slide. I think we fully believe what we're trying to create is very relevant and important. Young people today are, particularly young people of color and in the AAPI community, experience racism at really high rates. It's 2022, and I think 72% are experiencing racist comments and language directed to them at school. And many don't feel supported enough by their schools. So creating something outside of schools that young people can turn to, whether that's peer-to-peer or just building their resilience and confidence, is something we think is very critical and very needed, and not being met today. But in order for young people to use it, we need to address the reasons why half of them are not talking to anybody or using a resource today. And this includes fear, embarrassment, not feeling like it's going to make a difference, feeling like they deserved it, not knowing what resources are available, and not wanting to make things worse. So on the next slide, we think, a few things that are what we're building has to have. Obviously, we need to build awareness of what it is so that we don't have the issue of 73% of people just not using it and not knowing what's out there. We need to define what bullying and racism looks like. So for those who feel like they weren't even sure what to name it, or that it was bullying at the time, everybody's on the same page on like, this is not acceptable and this is bullying. We need to reinforce support and acceptance and not necessarily have to be a solution provider. That's not the role of this platform necessarily, but just connecting young people to peers or providing messages of hope or reinforcing that it's not their fault. And that leads to the last one. Is a big part of this campaign is to normalize it, because it's still a big part of, the shame and the stigma is still a big part of why people are not talking about it. That could be presenting stats, sharing how common it is. Like I mentioned earlier, being truthful in our language and not shying away from talking about how hard it is, will all be part of our strategy to combat the stigma. On the next slide, we believe we should prioritize middle schoolers for this initiative, because bullying and racism not only occurs the most during that time period, but it's a time period of transition, right? From a smaller to a bigger school, hormones, making new friends. It's also when smartphone adoption and social media use will become more prevalent. So really kind of thinking about this as a focal point, of course, with still high schoolers and the younger cohorts being a very important part of the project. Including parents, educators, and even friends. If we're thinking about the three biggest buckets of folks that were consulted when people did decide to talk to somebody, it was parents, educators, and friends. So how do we include them in what we're building in the campaign? And that could be anything from resources and education and tools to even things like conversation starters, or how to comfort or listen to somebody who's going through this. If it's avoiding questioning or skepticism, we heard from some parent interviews, they just don't know the right way to do it, and oftentimes it's just, oh, ignore it, or it's going to go away, which we know isn't necessarily helpful. And then finally, with AAPI and youth of color, we need to recognize that racism and bullying are distinct, but they're co-occurring. So they're intermingled. But again, I said this already, but our campaign and platform needs to address and will address both without just calling it bullying, but making sure that we talk about the racial element as part of this. There's one more slide, I'm sorry. We need to create a safe and honest community, and and peers we know is extremely important. And this could support a team line partnership, which is something that we've been talking about. But we do need to, one of the things that we want to learn when we talk to young people in our interviews, in our one-on-ones and focus groups, is whether trained teens is the way that they really want to go, or what that would make them feel the most comfortable, or whether it's just connecting them with regular peers, if that would be preferred. We need to leverage young people and their networks to get the word out about this, because as we learned, it's young people, it's the people they know they're the most engaged with and that they want to see the content from, as opposed to necessarily just people their age or influencers. And the last point is that we need to be careful about which companies and brands we partner with, or coming off as too professional, how we present our campaign. Participants rated ads, blogs, and posts from companies they like and experts in the field lowest in terms of likelihood to engage. So I think it just reverberates what we've been saying all along and what we've heard from stakeholders, is that it's for youth, by youth, but that connection of youth that they know is very powerful. So leveraging networks to get the word out. And I will pause there and open it up to discussion and questions.
Thank you so much for that, Teresa. Really appreciate it. I think you'll be moderating the rest of the conversation as well during this discussion time. So I definitely encourage everyone, of course, on the committee, but also the general public as well. If you have any comments, feedback, to absolutely pitch in during this discussion session. In fact, for anyone who has not partaken in any of these surveys or one-on-one interviews, please do share your thoughts and ideas with us. Teresa, I'll let you moderate this session.
Okay. Yep. I see Myron. Please go ahead. What is your question?
Yeah, I guess just two particular comments. One is, I hear a lot of what you're saying. A lot of it makes sense to best practices. The Office of Problem Gambling has done youth-led, peer-led reduction in gambling work with young people, so all that makes sense. So again, it's I always say this, and don't take offense, it's not rocket science. It's been done before by other groups. I also think this is very similar to all the various gay straight student alliances around the country that used to be illegal almost in the 1990s. And so once again, we're trying to figure out a way of creating a safe space where bullying is reduced and other things are being increased, healthier behaviors and norms and resiliency, what have you, however you want to call that. I guess the last part, and I guess I'm not sure who I should share it with. I guess I could share it with you or share it with the commission. If you weren't aware, there's a group called Asian Youth Center here in San Gabriel Valley, Los Angeles County, that did something very similar. It was a residents of San Gabriel Valley survey looking again at anti-Asian hate and bullying and young folks. And they actually have a report that, again, and it's not quite the same, because again, I think they were looking at more from a legal perspective and what's illegal, what's not illegal, hate incident versus hate crimes. But I think that could also maybe help inform the work that you're doing. So that's really my 2 cents. Just again, a lot of the basics are there. It's great. We've already seen stuff like this back before social media involving the LGBT communities and their allies. And there was indeed something very similar, not done very recently here in the San Gabriel Valley. So those are my 3 points I just wanted to share with the committee and for your purposes as well.
Great. Thank you, Myron. That's helpful. And I think we would love to get that information that you cited on the Asian Youth Center study, so we can follow up on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Myron. And Anna, please do correct me if I'm wrong. I do remember Asian Youth Center being one of the stakeholders that we had reached out to for recommendations, even for members of the advisory committee. I recall seeing them on our list.
I think that's true. There were a number of organizations with similar names, and we've shared those with Media Cause, but if that's not on the list, yeah, it would be great to get that information.
Thank you, Myron. I think I see Koa with her or his hand up. I apologize if I butchered your name.
Oh, you're all good. Hi, everyone. My name is Kwan Nathan Ngo. I'm a youth advocate with YLI. And a question I had was, if we do push the funding through, if we do create like the resource hub and so on, how would we make sure that youth know about it? Just because I know like in resource work in general, funding is one challenge, but once you go over that hump, there is a lot of issues that I see in connecting the general public with public resources. How do we make sure that issue is resolved here? Like what is the outreach and marketing strategy?
I can take that one, Teresa, if you want. Thank you for your question. I think we have a few ideas, but as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the strategy phase will be kind of the next phase once we're done with the audience research and some of those focus group that Teresa has talked to. So we don't have any, I would say, strategies or specific strategies in mind yet. We do know that there will be some paid media and some partnerships, potentially some influencer as well. So I don't want to give you, I would say, a more specific answer just because we're still kind of thinking about that in the best way to do just that. But we agree that this is definitely a risk of doing all of that and then not being able to to reach the audience that we're trying to reach. So this is definitely something that we keep in mind, that we'll share more updates once we are closer to wrapping up the strategy.
Thank you so much for answering my question.
That's a great question. I know one of the things that we had discussed really early on too is how distribution is really key to this particular campaign. And so actually this particular even discovery phase has given us a lot of insights, right? Previously, we didn't know that brands or even paid media marketing and even influencers may not necessarily be the best path or most trusted by youth. So maybe this is, I mean, we of course have focus groups coming up that will help give us more insights on how to structure this, but it may be that we need to rely kind of heavily more on, say, like a certain hashtag that gets people to share their stories more so we can get people to hear from folks that they already know and are familiar with based off of what Teresa was sharing earlier. But if anyone here has specific ideas that you didn't get to share with Media Cause during the earlier phase that you would like to share now, please do share your ideas too. And I also see Sharon's hand up. Sharon, over to you.
Can you hear me now? Oh, good. I noticed in the discussion and in the presentation, no one mentioned any faith-based organizations. I really believe that religion and faith-based organizations can support and possibly be the go-between between children, parents, and schools. And I'd like for you to consider that, faith-based organizations. Thank you.
That's a great point you raised, Sharon. I remember really early on in our conversation, we had brought up ideas around how, particularly during the pandemic, when people had just been overwhelmed and there weren't enough resources to even go around, for example, even if you wanted to sign up for mental health support or speak to counselors or therapists and psychologists, that they didn't have enough resources. So a lot of people did go to, let's say, their local faith-based organizations to ask for help. And there were these mini little mental health toolkits that were put together, shared with organizations to support. So it's a really, really good point that you brought up. And I'll pass it on to the Media Cause folks to address that, to see if that's been included as part of the process.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that question. Given our, at this point, we've been focusing on, we've spoken to experts within bullying and Asian American sort of based community organizations. We haven't reached out to faith-based organizations to date, but I think we do have a couple of more stakeholder sort of conversations earmarked for ongoing learning. So that's definitely something we can look into and feels relevant for the project. Thank you for that suggestion.
And I think
Stacy, yeah,
sorry, Teresa.
No, that's okay. I see Stacy's hand raised too, so just wanted to give you.
Hi, I'm really enjoying the report. And for contacting Media Cost, should we contact Teresa? And do you have could you put your email? Oh, I guess there's no chat, but I guess I can get it from the staff. But are you the point person for this project?
Yeah, you can copy either Melvin or I. We are both on, Melvin is also on this call, and either of us would be happy to answer any questions or follow up.
Because some of these, I mean, I just have, for example, I just wondered, that's great that you got the over 200 doing the Survey Monkey, and I just wondered how you got those. And I want to commend you for getting at least 1/3 Asian API, but I just wondered, where did you advertise for that and who are you working for? But again, you can be general and we can talk later offline if you like.
Well, I can answer that question quickly. SurveyMonkey provides a service for recruiting folks. So you indicate the requirements for them to have to meet. And then we put in screening questions as well to make sure that they have experienced some form of bullying so that their answers are relevant, that they live in California, that they fit within a specific age group, and then we screen them for their ethnicity as well. Does that help answer your question? Oh,
Definitely.
Stacy still on? Okay,
definitely.
great.
And again, you and I can talk later, but I just wondered where you got the list of Asian organization, nonprofits, mental health organizations to work with. So we'd love to, if you need more or whatever. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you. We did get a list from Anna and Sarah at the commission, and it was a fairly robust list, but certainly not inclusive of everyone. So absolutely happy to connect after this and talk more. And I think,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
I just want to add, that was a list from the legislative staff and the caucus. So that was some of the work that was done in putting this together.
And then, is it Kwa?
Yes, yes.
Great.
Hi. Hi again. I just wanted to ask, when it comes to collecting information, especially with AAPI groups, is the data disaggregated? So do we just so the 1/3 AAPI, do we know if it's broken down by ethnicity, like East Asian, Southeast Asian? Just because the AAPI umbrella is super broad, and I'm wondering just how much of it includes Pacific Islanders, Southeast Asians specifically.
Yeah, that's a great question. We did not break it down to that level. And the way that SurveyMonkey collects, the way that they collect the people that form their panels, they don't break it down to that level as well. But for our focus groups and our one-on-ones, we are aiming to get a mix of just making sure that there's representation across different AAPI groups within that. So that's, unfortunately, we didn't get that level of detail.
Thank you for answering.
Sure. And I think I saw a hand. Myron?
Yeah, so I thank Kwa for that observation. It helped jog my memory, trigger the right thinking, additional thinking, just because I've had the privilege of working on this for 3 decades or something like that across the country. So I guess just similar, it's not so much did you collect the data, but rather, I suppose as you're doing the focus groups, just being mindful of within the so-called Asian American Pacific Islander rubric, to also be mindful of those who are South Asian, those who are being targeted for Islamophobia. There's a huge Nepalese, Bhutanese community out in El Cerrito. And so again, Kwa's very simple question makes it very clear that despite the limited funding, I suppose, that in terms of doing the best decision making, you're going to have to look at language needs, look at people who are more recent immigrants, not more recent immigrants, people who are being targeted, not necessarily because they're Asian per se, but they're immigrants or have an accent. And again, just the unique needs when you're talking about people who appear to be Muslim or Sikh or what have you. So it's very complicated. And so I guess that goes back to an original point that was sort of implied by some of the other speakers and myself, that yay to the API Ledge Caucus for creating this funding, yay for any kind of work that helps elevate and center the needs of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, but given the very limited resources and definitely the clear divergent and unique needs of the various communities, we need to have to, this is going to require a little bit more thinking. I say this with openness and happiness, I suppose, that, you know, I live in a very nice zip code, 91030, where everyone's very well-to-do and lots of PhDs in the families. And then we're next door to another zip code where everyone's very, very, very well-to-do and could buy mansions and invest in businesses. Nevertheless, and then there's also next door LAUSD. And I think about Asians in all three communities, and they're all unfortunately going to have rates of anti-Asian bullying and racism, but they're going to be very different. So I just put that out there as well, that this work is so crucial and critical. And I know the API Ledge Caucus wants it to happen well. But again, this is where, you know, again, if we start bringing in everyone under the sun, it's already kind of messy. And if you just try to focus on Pacific Islanders, like the difference between Samoans and Tongans, for example, let alone anyone else, or those who are Bangladeshi versus Indian, or the three Chinese groups I kind of hinted at in the three zip codes, it's just very, very difficult to do this work. So putting it out there, and I look forward to seeing what happens and trying to be supportive in the work that you do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think there's a lot of layers of this. And as we hear everyone's individual experiences, we're keeping in mind that we want something that can address all of the unique experiences that come with being from different backgrounds, but also finding common threads as well, so that we can make sure that we create something that's relevant and not have to be tailored for every single ethnicity group. And we are finding there are threads. And so appreciate that comment, and we'll definitely keep that in mind as we continue on this project. Any other questions right now? Okay. Great. I'll pass it off to Melvin for the second half.
Thank you, Teresa, and thanks everyone for that discussion and those questions. We will move to the cultural landscape piece of the presentation. So for the next probably 20 minutes or so, I'll go over our mapping of that cultural landscape around bullying and acts of hate, with particular focus on that Gen Z audience. And so we do this works as we go and goes into the wider world of campaign discovery, trying to connect with the audience insight and expert insight that Teresa just went through, as it contributes to the formation of our full campaign strategy. And so some of the questions that we had, all of this will really inform what the strategy will be. How do we, reach out to our audiences, and how do we take into account some of those complexity that we just talked about? So to do this cultural landscape, we reviewed a wide range of government, academic, and relevant sources, and synthesized our findings within, I would say, 4 core themes that we'll try to cover quickly today. So the first one is something that Teresa mentioned already, is the problematic lack of shared language or understanding of bullying and acts of hate for Gen Z, and really being able to be precise and be clear with the word that we use. The second one is the tweens as a focus audience. So by tween, we mean young people aged 9 through 12 that are considered too old to be a child, but also too young to be a teenager. The third theme is kind of the vanished line between what it means to be offline and online today. And then lastly, we also looked at what has worked in order to prevent and reduce bullying. So I'll dive in, in the first theme, Words equal power. So as Teresa mentioned, our research showed is that there is a lack of shared language or understanding of bullying and acts of hate among young people. And so what we see is that they really need the vocabulary to be able to express clearly what they experience. For example, not all bullying incidents are hate crime, but all hate crimes are bullying. And so using a clear and specific language for our campaign will definitely be very key to have an impact with our target audience and be able to service them in the best of our ability. In order to find kind of that common ground and find those words, we looked at a few definitions of bullying. We have two. I'm not going to read the entire definition here on the right. The first one is the definition from the CDC and the Department of Education that they released in 2014. And I wanted to focus more on the three core elements of that definition. The first one being, bullying being any unwanted aggressive behavior by another youth or group of youth. The second one, having that aggressive behavior involving an observed or perceived power imbalance. And then the third one being the repetition or high likelihood of repetition of those behavior. Another definition we looked at from Psychology Today, which is somewhat similar, and I can read that one. Bullying is a distinctive pattern of repeatedly and deliberately harming and humiliating others, specifically those who are smaller, weaker, younger, or in any way more vulnerable than the bully. And so really that the fact that someone has less power is really what distinguishes bullying from other type of aggression. I'll also bring your attention to something that we've seen in the survey results, and we see also in our research that studies indicates that bullying usually peaks around ages 11 to 13 and decreases as children grow older. Another definition we looked at is the definition of hate crime, as we are, thinking about hate crime in particular for the AAPI community and youth. We think again that it's very important to know, what we're talking about and making sure that we're using the correct term and we're not shying away from those issues. So hate crime is when someone bullies you or commits a crime against you because they perceive you to be different in some way. And so this could be, based on your sexual orientation, gender identity, race, religion, disability, or all of the above as well. So this is something that we wanted to kind of have a baseline in terms of what we mean by bullying and what we mean by hate crimes. On the next slide, we looked at, once we have those terms, we wanted to look at search results and how can we, is there a correlation, I would say, between the search queries on Google, so the searches that people, put in the Google search bar, and when bullying happens. And there is a correlation, which means that we can use search results and online trends are good indicators of when bullying will occur. And so this is very, very interesting for us as we're starting to think more about the strategy and what type of partnership we could try to form for that campaign, and thinking about partnering with tech companies to be able to use those search results and that data in our advantages to put the right type of content in front of people when they are looking for these type of terms. Another aspect of that is coming kind of out of that study is that I would say traditionally we've been looking at online and offline behavior and bullying behavior together. Sorry, not together, but separately, but we should be looking at them together because as we will see further down that presentation, that line is a lot less clear than it used to be. So bullying is common. This is something that I think we all know. I think we wanted to still have those stats and share those numbers with you. 1 in 5 high school students reported being bullied at school in the last year, and 1 in 6 reported being bullied online. In total, about 20% of students ages 12 to 18 experience bullying nationwide. We wanted to take some time on this slide because this is something that we see as very important as a big opportunity for this campaign, is that when we look at the resources around bullying, a lot of these resources are directed towards teens or towards high school students, but there is a lack of focus on that tween audience that we talked about. And that is problematic because, as you can see on the right, 90% of students in grades 4 to 8 report having been harassed or bullied. So even though, as I think, Teresa, you mentioned that as students get older, that percentage decrease, and you can see it here, we see that tweens are overlooked or are not spoken about directly about bullying, and this presents a big opportunity to answer that need. And I think this is kind of a sweet spot for our campaign. Of course, we will also, try to target, younger people and people in high school, but we do feel like that tween audience is really important for that campaign. And one of the reasons why is because at that age, again, you're at that in-between stage of your life, whether it is your autonomy, your sense of self, your identity, your growth, and your access to technology. So this represents a big opportunity for us. I know there were some questions around, race, ethnicity, and bullying. It is not clear. I mean, we couldn't find, I think, a lot of research around specific bullying because of race or national origin, but we do know that students across the country who identified as Asian Americans or Pacific Islanders, were reporting bullying and discrimination. We also know that the numbers that we see here on the right are from 2017, and that 15% is probably a lot higher today based on what happened during the pandemic and what Stacy raised in your initial comment before the presentation. We also did some research around where does bullying happen when it happens in person. And most studies state that bullying happens when there is unstructured time at school, and you can see it there, whether it is hallway or stairwell at 43%, cafeteria, bathroom, locker room, somewhere else in the school building. We also were actually surprised to see the classroom percentage being so high, and that kind of brings the question of, how can we, better target, teachers and, friends and peer of, youth being bullied, to be able to reduce that number and having them not only, being bystander, but really being able to come in and, say something if they see an act of bullying. Bullying also, I would say broadly, what we saw is that it's not that bullying necessarily happens more in school. It's more than bullying happens more when people are gathering in person. And with the pandemic, hopefully, dying down, we're going to be moving back to that. And so studies have shown that bullying rates have plunged over the course of the pandemic, showing that there is a correlation between in-person activities and bullying rates. And so with students being more in school and probably hopefully getting back to normal, this is something that we want to be mindful of. And again, how can educators and parents have a role to be able to bring that number down? In terms of cyberbullying, in most studies that we've seen, it's often considered as just another space where bullying happen. But again, as we mentioned, we need to keep in mind that there is the line between what is in person or offline and what is considered online are blurred today, if they even exist at all, and especially for young people who are, whether you're on your phone, you're on your smartwatch, you're always online or you're always connected. And we can see that, like, the channels that are used by our target audience, whether it is YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, all of those, we can see reports of pretty high rates of bullying on those channels. We also looked at cyberbullying as it comes to that tween audience. This is something that Teresa mentioned already based on the survey, but we also wanted to kind of confirm that with some data. And again, this makes sense if we think about it, because at that age, this is when you first start having, access to your own, phone or other devices. You are creating your, your first, profile on social media. You're also going on gaming platforms, and all of that, contributes of you being a potential target of bullying experiences. We've also looked at how to stop bullying or how to prevent it. And one thing that came up very strongly in all the research that we've consulted is that peer intervention has proven to be the most effective way to stop a bullying event. As you can see here, 50%, more than half of bullying situations stop when a peer intervenes on behalf of the students being bullied. This is important because tweens are usually the first one, and young people are usually the first one to witness a bullying act. However, we can also see that they only intervene less than 20% of the time. So this is where I think our initiative can play a role in two things. We obviously want to discourage, bullying acts, but we also need to encourage positive behavior in healthy environments. It cannot only be focusing on what not to do. We also need to be able to kind of promote what should be done. And this is something that I think is a proven element. It's something that must be done not only for the young people, but for teachers, for parents, and other members of the community as well. So again, it's important not only to define bad behavior, but also create shared values and promote and reward positive behaviors so that we can have that frame of reference as well. And then we also looked at these 10 ways to help reduce bullying in schools. Most of those, I'm not going to go through all of them, but most of those, this is something that we have seen both in our research, so some of the slides that I just went through, and some of the insights that were shared in stakeholder interviews, but also in the survey. We also looked at Gen Z and looked at key facets of that target audience that we should keep in mind and that we can leverage for this campaign. So the first one being that Gen Z is the most acknowledging, willing, and concerned generation for their mental health. According to a Deloitte survey, Gen Z put the mental health of their generation as one of their top 5 concerns. So this is something that I think we can, again, leverage and use to our advantage. The second aspect of that is that Gen Z is aware and is willing to talk about mental health. They're actually the least likely generation to report a good or excellent mental health. And I know before the presentation, we were talking about, mass shootings and other issues, and this is something that is definitely impacting Gen Z's mental health as well. And then lastly, and this is a big one too, and something that Teresa mentioned as well, based on our survey, is that Gen Z usually rises to the real challenges, both in person and online, meaning that Gen Z is really open to to talk about their mental health struggle. They are not afraid to talk about hard topics or different issues of their lives. Sorry. They are also using humor and satire to be able to cope with some of those issues. So some of the content that we can see on TikTok or as a social platform is really key to that, and being able to use that and incorporate that into our campaign is something that we will also look for. And then lastly, we're talking about the power of promoting positive behavior. And same, this is something that Gen Z does, and takes to their internet and social media interaction. Moving on to our cultural landscape takeaways. So we have 5 takeaways to kind of summarize what I just talked about, and you'll see that some of those takeaways are also, very aligned with what Teresa has shared. I shared at the beginning of this presentation. So the first one is say it how it is. So again, we really need to be straightforward, to be clear, and to be honest as we talk to young people about bullying and about their mental health. They usually don't respond well to language that is unclear or vague or soft. They just want to tackle these these issues straight on, and this is something that we need to do as well in order to be able to have an impactful campaign, but also being able to to reach that audience as well. The second one is bullying is predictable and preventable. Again, we know the factors and the influences that point to a person behaving as a bully. And this is something that we can kind of try to focus on to be able to, put resources or sharing stories or having those, peer communities to be able to, work on that and discourage bullying behavior and creating more positive and welcoming environments. The third takeaway, again, is Gen Z is, just ready to talk about these issues. The first one was more around, using, shared language and really being clear. And it's the same here in terms of we don't have to kind of dance around the issue. Our campaign should be able to, provide a compelling and clear narrative. And if we do that, our target audience should be able to, participate and create content and be engaged with our campaign. The fourth one, again, it's the lines again between online and offline being blurred. This is an approach that this campaign will take, being a holistic and kind of having both online and offline merged together as we are thinking about it and communicating about this campaign. And then lastly, the fifth one is a game of their own. We have talked about how bullying and cyberbullying are usually seen as two separate entities or situation, but in reality, the same dynamics and power systems are at play whether you are online or whether you are in person. And video games are different from social media, but we also know that they are one of the primary instances of cyberbullying. So this is also something that we want to keep in mind. And we want to be able to find a way to include that into our campaign strategy. With that, this is the end of the cultural landscape piece of the presentation. And I will open again for discussion. We do have some prompts that we put here, but would love to hear also if there is any initial thoughts from anyone. Yes, Myron?
Yeah, hey, thank you so much for presenting. I think I only have 3 points. One was the pie graph you had concerning rates of bullying and Asian Pacific Islanders, I suppose. I guess the only thing to share is that having had the privilege of running and working at Asian American serving community-based organizations, it's very clear to us that, especially with young people, that bullying and hate incidents are very much underreported. You actually work or volunteer in any of these groups. You hear way too many stories about what's happening, about kids being shoved in lockers, people throwing away their dictionaries. It's all the random stuff that's kind of sad and horrible. You can even go to the Boys and Girls Club in the Western San Gabriel Valley, because we serve some of the Asian folks in that area, and you'll just hear everything. So again, I once again when you think about Asian and Pacific Islanders, since we make up no more than 15 or so % of the population, depending how you look at it, where you are in the country, and less than 5% sometimes, you look at national stats, and then also possibly only collecting data in English, you're going to get underrepresentation. So I just say, take it with a grain of salt. I guess number two, I hear what you're saying. You were looking at classrooms and hallways and areas where it's not structured and how bad things can happen. I guess I do have to share, I'm not that surprised that bad things happen in the classroom. I say that with two reasons, at least. One, having been a former litigator where I represented Asian kids or LGBT kids or their allies who suffered harassment or bullying or worse in the classroom, it really was because the educator or the person, the adult in charge, turned a blind eye to it, or even worse, the instigators were the ones creating an environment where harassment of a young person could happen based on their personal characteristics. So I really do think it's kind of sad that that is such a high number, but it's also not surprising. I think if you ask those who are litigators who have to represent young people against these kind of issues, it's not surprising because, again, we're not going to represent every case. It has to be pretty egregious. And so therefore, all the many, many cases where the harassment and bullying does not add up to $25,000 or more in damages, no one's going to help them. They'll talk to the lawyer and the lawyer's like, yeah, I can't even represent you. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Good luck with filing complaint. And the ACLU won't help you either because it's not $1 million lawsuit. So I got that as the second point. Last one is, I guess I have a query or question, just because when I hear what you're saying about peer-to-peer, sometimes the best way of stopping stuff at intervention. So I guess my concern or my query is, if we're indeed trying to reduce bullying and anti-racist incidents in the school system, I don't know how comfortable I am with having peers or young people needing to do all the work. You hear all the time from underrepresented people, why are we being forced to do all this labor? The labor should not be borne by us. And particularly, I can just take an example right now of my own school district, where one of the parents who is South Asian sort of having that exact same conversation with the school, where the school sort of responded, well, we could try and work on peer involvement. And she's like, no, this is not the answer. You're the school, you're legally liable, you're there to help protect my brown child while my brown child is in the school system. So I don't know how. I just, again, ask a question about, although it may be very effective to do peer-to-peer, either intervention or support or what have you, I do have some pause and want to process further the idea of peers being so much a part of the solution. So that's my third point. Thank you.
Thank you, Myron. Thank you for your first 2 points. This is very helpful for us to hear. On the third one, I think it's more seeing the solution as being community centered than more, I would say, heavily favoring the peer-to-peer. I totally hear what you're saying about the responsibility of schools and teachers to kind of protect kids from bullying, acts, and hate crimes. And I think this will need to be kind of a collective effort. Schools, teachers need to do their part, parents need to do their part, and then we can encourage kids and peers to step in if they feel comfortable, actually giving them the resources to be able to be more comfortable about these situations. I don't know, Teresa, if you have anything to add.
Oh, I think that was great. Thank you. I agree.
Thanks. I hope that that helps answer your query, Myron.
Yeah, it's just, again, we're still in the Me Too movement or Me Too kind of place. And the question is, again, there are the people who are perpetrating bad behavior. There are those who are trying to prevent, or the people who are perpetrated upon, right? The person who's bullied, use that word, not victim. But then what does that really look like? So I guess I'm still just interrogating the so-called power dynamics. But again, this is a work in progress. I'm just raising concerns, not necessarily saying anything beyond that at the moment.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Myron, and the Media Cause team. I haven't noticed other hands yet, but in the meantime, to build on that thread a little bit more, I know in other aspects of the presentation, we also talked about the idea of for Gen Z by Gen Z or for youth by youth. And so I think there's a little bit that we might need to do around reconciling these different threads of how do we make sure that it's by Gen Z, but at the same time, not putting the full responsibility on youth, and how do we think about bringing in a community approach? I think as we get into these group setting interviews where we can actually talk to people one-on-one, and will be helpful to hear more specific ideas around how it can be by youth without overburdening what needs to be done. So I know we have new hands, so I'll pass it back to Melvin.
Yeah, and one thing I'll share before giving the mic to Candy Lee is we also have the Youth Advisory Committee, which Candy Lee is actually a member. And I think we also want to leverage, this committee to be able to, find the right way to involve the peer medium community. Candy, do you have a question or a thought?
Yeah, I have a comment. So what Myron said, I feel like that really made me think. But I was thinking like a way to kind of meet in the middle could be like, listening to what Gen Z has to say and like using our ideas, but like not expecting us to do all the work. Like when it comes to like the actual like nitty gritty, having professional help and stuff like that, I think that's very important because I think we do have really good insight and ideas, but we don't know everything. And like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I see a lot of nodding, and I think we're all in agreement there. Thank you. Any other comments or question, or anybody wants to answer some of the question that we put on the slide? Yes, Asha?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Candy said. So I also volunteer at this teenage-based hotline called Teen Line, which I think you mentioned in your presentation. And sort of the importance of Teen Line is that since it is this teen-to-teen support system, we're able to relate and be more comfortable and talk to fellow teens. And we're able to sort of support each other in a deeper level because we're in the same age group. So I completely understand what you mean in terms of needing sort of adults in the conversation as well. And I agree with what Candy said. I think we should have some sort of compromise. So this teen to teen like support system is one aspect of this platform, not really, maybe not centralized, but one aspect of one of the many aspects that we should focus on. But also, once again, as Commissioner Chen said, not putting the burden and responsibility of all of this on teens as well. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your comment. And I see Kwa, you have a question?
Yeah, first I just want to echo what was just said about not putting all of the burden on youth. Because when I was thinking about how to interact with youth and really cultivate trust in what we're building here, I do think that putting involving youth and putting their faces on this is a really effective way to go about it. But because we're talking about youth and telling them to reach out when they're having a problem, most of the people we're linking them to are adults, whether it be an educational administration or in mental health services. So it's not like you just need youth to say oh, mental health is real. I feel like that message has already been pushed and it's already been understood. But getting youth to advocate for and say that this adult run system is one they can trust in, that's another ballgame. And that also means that there have to be adults who are present in the marketing schema who express an understanding and intuitive understanding of how youth work. Because at the end of the day, when they're going to be reaching out for services, it's an adult who will be delivering it. So they also need to be at the table saying, we understand you, and they need to communicate that they understand us. If that makes sense. If you have any questions, please let me know.
no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for bringing that up. Again, couldn't agree more, and I agree. And I think it brings me to the third question that we have here on the slide about potential ideas or thoughts that anybody might have into how do we bring parents and educators together to be able to be that positive force and resource for kids who might come to them. To your point, Kwa.
Really great insights from everyone. In fact, I'd love to hear everyone's ideas. On top of that, I was even going to suggest that, of course, having kind of a more formal setting over Zoom is helpful for starting this conversation. But if you have ideas for a better way in which we can collect ideas, please do share that with us as well. For example, it may be that most Gen Z don't like the formal setting of having to log on to Zoom, have a conversation with us, and share these ideas in a very formal setting. So there might be one that you find to be more comfortable, that makes it easier, or at least are the basic that we can do to lower the barriers for people to submit and share ideas without fear of judgment. So if you have ideas for how we should be better collecting ideas, please do share that with us as well.
Yes, and we're happy to share even just a Google form where you can just input those. It can be anonymous to your point, so that you're feeling completely safe and comfortable doing that. We can do that later this afternoon after the meeting. Yes, Candy.
Another idea is like something like a shared Google Doc or something similar to that, where you could see what other people has written already. You could like log on whenever, like when you have an idea, not at like a set meeting time, and like you could add on to what other people have said, stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've used Mural before and other tools in the YAC meeting, where you can kind of like add post-its and add things. It's definitely something we can do here as well. Any other thoughts or question on the presentation?
Maybe one last thing is that if there's anyone that you consider, for everyone who's commented so far, thanks so much. If there is a peer who is also a youth member, or if you feel like there are parents, educators that you think should be involved in these conversations, please feel free to reach out to us separately as well. You're welcome to reach out to Anna or any of the folks directly at Media Cause or myself. And we can make sure that we put you in touch with the right people to be involved in subsequent conversations. So I just want to make sure that if you feel like there's someone who has great ideas who's not here, that we have a channel to engage them as well. Perfect. Melvin, back to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chen. I guess if there is no other question, we talked about parents and educators. I don't know if, do we need to open the discussion to public comments? Oh, I see Carrie has a raise her hand.
I wanted just to acknowledge how much work has gone into this. And I know there's lots of areas of growth and continued growth. One of the things I was thinking about, and just everyone's feedback is we're kind of looking through all the information that has been gathered. One of the things that we're looking at in LA County, especially with school starting again, and I know we've all seen things on the news around just changes and adjustments that are continuing to happen. We're looking at doing a lot more kickoff meetings with school districts and really trying to engage parents. And so I'm wondering is the last question, and I just been kind of pondering ways to kind of get educators and parents on board, is the possibility of just, I don't know if it would be school district wide, statewide, but just, the Department of Education pushing off or through the OAC, but just partnerships about kind of small bits of information or how ways and opportunities they can do kickoffs or kind of market or advertise. Because I think parents do get overwhelmed. One thing we've been hearing sometimes from our districts and our mental health liaisons for schools is that there's a lot of information, and sometimes not overloading it, but really making it like a steady stream of information and a steady highlight of that engagement has been something that, we're really going to try to focus on this year. So not just doing maybe 2 events all year or 2 blasts, but really kind of having it be part of the conversation, or like monthly newsletters, or just kind of building it as a steady, consistent messaging. So I just want to kind of put that out there. I don't know that there's a perfect way of doing it, but I think with everything happening and such the importance of this topic, maybe it's the dosage and how we engage, versus like all up front. For many of you that may have children or families, you know that when your kids are starting, you get very heavy loaded with a bunch of information, right? But maybe a sprinkle effect might be really helpful. So that's just something we're really trying to partner with. And I just thought I would share that with all of you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Carrie. This is I think very on point, and I think those insights are going to be very helpful for us, both as we're thinking about, I think Teresa has had mentioned, the way we're going to communicate with our youth audience is going to be very different from how we're going to communicate with parents and educators. So that makes a lot of sense, and I think we may also reach out to see if we can continue that conversation in a separate meeting.
So we can move to public comment, but I don't know if there's any additional comments as those may line up. Melvin, could you just say really quickly again what you're going to do with the information we got today and what the next step is of the project? I know you mentioned it, but I think it'd be helpful to reiterate now that they've heard all of this.
Yes, let me see if I can go back quickly to that process slide. But so what we are going to do is, first of all, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join today and hear, this presentation and give, feedback, ask questions. This is very helpful as we are, continuing to be in that, or, closing, I would say that research phase and the discovery phase before moving into the campaign strategy. I know Stephanie on our team is taking notes. So we will kind of incorporate some of the feedback that we hear and make sure that we are, using that as we're starting to think about the campaign strategy. We will also probably reach out to, some of you to, have follow-up conversation on some of the points you raised. And then on our end, what we'll continue to do is do these focus groups and these one-on-one interview with youth and educators. I think we already talked, and Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, with a few parents. Yes. But these focus group and interviews, I think, are going to be very important for us to get those feedback and ask some of the questions that were raised today to make sure that we are on the right track. And then once we are kind of wrapping up that phase, which should be around mid-September, then we'll dive into the campaign strategy and the brand development of the campaign and the initiative. Again, as Teresa mentioned, we want to make sure that we find the right way to communicate and to position that brand to be both being able to reach out to the youth, but also to parents, to educators, and really have that community approach. So this is kind of the immediate and I would say medium time next step for us.
Yeah, thank you, Melvin. And in fact, thank you to everyone for your discussion and comments, especially as we go forward and get closer to execution. Certainly, we want to make sure to collect everyone's ideas at this phase, but as we get closer to execution, there's a number of points to take away here, including this piece about sprinkling or dripping information over time. I think that's a really important piece for sure. Because even when we look at parents and educators, they're all on social media as well now. So how do we make sure they're not overwhelmed with information, but there's sustainability to this piece? It's not a one-time and done campaign, but that it continues to stay top of mind. So that longevity and long-term impact piece is definitely something we're keeping in mind. So as Anna mentioned, we're now moving into public comments. So if we have any public comments, please do raise your hand. Stacy.
I just want to thank you for the great presentation. Lots of information. I want to digest it. And I just wondered, is it possible, Chair Chen, it's really great to hear all this, but unless I was mistaken, we haven't had a meeting for the public since like last October, November. And it would just be great just to keep up. I mean, as you could say, we're not trying to be overly crook. We just want to know. But if we have to wait 6 months, I mean, I didn't think this project was going to be that long. So if we could get maybe updates a little bit more often than every 6 months or every 9 months, I think people would feel more comfortable.
Absolutely. And I'm sure Anna can add in as well. In full transparency, even the contracting process took us some time. And of course, over the holidays, that stretched things out. And then, of course, for the media cause team to be gathering all this information, they had done over 200 conversations. I was interviewed as part of the process, as many of the others who were part of the committee and who are on the call. So I know that that certainly takes time, given the size of the media cause team that you're seeing today. But I would really defer to both Anna as well as Melvin and Teresa on this point. I know Melvin had looked at kind of next steps in terms of timeline. So if you have any thoughts on when you feel like we would have, or we would be ready for a next update, maybe it would be helpful to give everyone a sense of timeline so that we do have more frequent updates. So thank you, Stacy, for raising that.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. I think based on some of the things that I've outlined a little bit ago, I think we could give another update once we wrap up all the conversation, the focus group, and one-on-one interviews to kind of share some of those insights, what we've heard, and if again we have questions, feedback, we would love to have those at that point. And then after that, as I mentioned, we'll start, working on both the campaign strategy and brand development. And so we'll probably have another update at that point, probably towards, I would say definitely before the end of the year, to share, the campaign strategy, share what the brand would look like, and again, give, opportunity to member of the committee and then member of the public to also, share thoughts, feedback, and, questions on the strategy.
Perfect. Thank you, Melvin. Any other public comments? If no other public comments for now, hopefully all of you here feel comfortable with reaching out to any of us at any time, whether it's myself or Anna on the staff at the commission or members of the media cause team. So with that, thank you all so much, everyone, for being here today, and a huge thank you to the media cause team for putting all of this together. And thank you, Anna, for spearheading all of this on the side of the commission. I would like to thank everyone for all of your comments and for being here today and for all of your super, super helpful insights and input. And wishing you all have a great rest of your day. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting. But for now, this meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you at the next one.
Bye, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Bye,
Bye,
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.